I'm going to show you how to make a grape using the dry brush technique. It's very easy, but it takes a little practice and it's really worth doing it. You want hardly anything on your brush. See, there's more. I'm wiping my brush out. Now there's less. See that? When it gets to this point, you can dry brush. See that? Look at that. It could be a face, it could be a cheek that you want a beautiful cheek, you don't want any marks. That's how you dry brush. This way. So give it a try, see what you think, play with it and practice, and you're going to be wonderful. Now let's get started on our grape project. So I have some dirty colors up here, which I don't mind. You know how I paint, kind of sketchy. So first thing I'm going to do is get into my color, mix it up, and I'm just making an oval. And just get it in there. And this will be my grape. Maybe I'll have another grape over here. Who knows? Just that when you're doing this, you don't want them all on the same plane. So bring this one down. And you can make a bunch. You can do whatever you want. But for this, I just want to teach you how to do a dry brush technique. So I'm going to go and we're going to make this like a purpley grape. So what I'm going to do is very little alcohol and very little ink on my brush. And I'm going to make a purple grape. So I'm just going to get it in there and get the feeling of the grape. And just with this dirty brush, you see this is dry brush technique. You see how little ink is on that brush and how I can control it. And there's less and less all the time. So that's how dry brushing works. You just use a little, look how beautiful and little amount is there. And that is how you dry brush. There's hardly anything on that, but it still makes a beautiful blush. But you see how that's streaky? I want this, there's still enough alcohol on this brush that I can come back and smooth things out. And that's how you do dry brush technique. I'm going to go into a little poppy field and very dry. I'm drying this out really well on my brush. And I'm just going to put a little on there. That is still really juicy. So I'm going to wipe it out on my paper towel. Come back up and I'm going to bring it up here. See how much ink is on there? That's a lot. But in this case, I don't mind it because I want the color. But I want it soft. No crusties on this one. All soft dry brush technique. I'm wiping out my brush so there's less and less ink on it. I'll put it over here so you can see how much less there is from this one. And then I'm going to pull a little reflected light out of there and then just soften. I notice when I paint, if I'm doing something soft, I talk soft. So bear with me. Anyway. You see that's pretty streaky? That's because there's still a lot of alcohol in my brush, but I can come back and soften. So when I do portraits, this is how I do it. So if somebody has a cheek, I just keep working in it and softening to the point where I can almost rouge it in, like as if it's makeup. See right here, I'm starting to rouge it in. I'm getting that beautiful color change, but it's soft. See that? Purple Twilight. And I want this area over here a little darker, but I want it really soft now. That's still pretty juicy. I'm coming on my paper, and I want to get a little more color though, and soften it in. And you have to work at it, little circles, little softness, but look how nice and smooth that is. It isn't all crusty. And I'm going to let that sit just to show you the difference. Here's a grape that I'm putting in. And of course, if you put it in real juicy and let it flow, it's going to be soft. But the thing is, you have a hard time getting value control. So when you start adding colors, you get the crusty edges. And that's the difference between this technique and this technique. So that's the typical technique. And this is the dry brush technique. So I gotta wipe out my brush. So now it's dry. I come over here and test it. And then I kind of goof around. So that's the difference in the two techniques. You want more color, you just come back, go into your color, and tap into it. And you can reinforce all the color you want. Now I'm going to go back into the red, the poppy field, and reinforce that a little bit. Sometimes I'll just put it in, let it dry out a little bit. And maybe even put some crimson in there. I love color. The crimson's a little darker and a little more purpley than the poppy field. And now my brush is very dry and I can really manipulate it. Look at that. See the difference? So now I'm wiping out my brush and I want to put a highlight on it right here. And I let that sit, but on this one I want to put a highlight right there. Now I want to lift off on this one where the reflected light is. And you can see how a little bit more crusty it is. They're both beautiful. It's just a different technique. And I want this to be a little lighter here, so I would goof around with it. So I wanted you to see both styles so you can understand what the dry brush does compared to a more damp brush. And then I'll lift off again. Say it's a little more crusty and not as controlled, where over here, it's soft. So if I was doing a portrait, this would work lovely and I wouldn't get hot edges. I'm wiping out my brush really good and just softening that edge with the dry brush. Then I come back in, add a little drop of alcohol and blot to get my light back. And I am using photo paper. And I want to put a reflected light down here. The reflected light tends to come through and be on the other side of where the light's coming. Wiping my brush out really good. Now I want to add a little bit of a juicier, gemmier color in the middle. So I'm going back into the crimson and just dry brushing that in. See the difference? And dance it around a little bit. So that's a pretty little grape. So imagine a whole colossal group of grapes. See how the marks here? Too strong. So I'm just going to take that dirty brush that's dry and soften it. Okay, let's plant this guy on the table. So we're going to go into some sepia, some teak wood. I love mixing my colors. And I want to give it a nice shadow. And plant it on the table. And there's my table. Okay. I want to soften back here to make a finished kind of a look to it. Okay, so a lot of times you think, oh no, I made a mistake. It's all screwed up. Don't worry about it. See that edge? I don't like it. I just want to soften it out. Using the dry brush, I can soften it back. And I'm just softening it back and bringing it right into the background. This way the color kind of blends into the background, it kind of joins it. Now I'm going to go back into the poppy field with my dry brush and just give it a little more of a pop with the poppy field. Okay, that's a little hot edge there, not a problem because I got my nice beautiful dry brush. Wipe out my brush. And I just want to soften that. So I'm just going to lift off, bring back my light, drying it, keeping it dry. And I'm just going to smooth that in. And let this dry, because as it dries, it darkens a bit. And now I'm going to just lighten my table. Bring in the light into the shadow. It's easier to manipulate. You can always do it again and again, so don't worry about it if it's perfect the way you like. I'm going to just bring this up. Okay, so we get this purple grape over here. And I just want to soften that. Okay, so that looks really good. I really like it. And I want to soften here a little bit more so the light isn't always, it is gradual. You want the light to be gradual. Okay, so now if I'm doing it with regular techniques, like just putting in the alcohol, lightening up around the edge, it looks really good. It's just a different technique. But you see how much the lines are real showy. So let's put a little red in it, just so you'll see how I would manipulate it. Put a little more ink on that. Wiping my brush out a little bit, getting the red out, and then, so it's still a beautiful little grape, but it's a different technique. And then I'll lighten up the foreground so the light goes into the shadow. And it sits on the table. So basically, that's how you do a dry brush technique, and this is just the usual wet technique, using wet ink into wet. But you can see you can keep playing with that as well. It's just a matter of what you want. But I hope this gives you an idea on how to do dry brush technique. That's what I was trying to get you to learn. And just highlight your lights and bring your light into your shadow. And let's just to finish off the picture, I want to get a little more of that purple, a little red, a little crimson. Bring that down. So you see how sweet is that too? But it's just a different look. Using some ink, a little lifting for reflected light. Bring some of that color up. So you can see the difference. Put a little of that purple in there, but as a dry brush. And you can always come back and reinforce your shadows. There's a lot of reinforcing going on, folks. I'm always going back and forth. And I'm just using a dark color. See how when I darken this lights up. And just bringing that over, and voila. So dry brush technique, kind of a wet and juicy technique, gets a lot of lines and all that. So I hope this helps you with dry brush technique. We are going to do more, but learn your dry brush. So happy painting. Till next time. Bye.